What if one single strike could pull the entire world into a massive war? It sounds like the kind of scenario you'd only see in a movie, but according to multiple reports, the situation unfolding between Iran, Israel, and the United States is starting to look dangerously close. In just a matter of days, waves of military strikes have reportedly hit Iranian targets, tensions have exploded across the Middle East, and global leaders are now facing a question that no one wants to answer. Could this conflict spiral into something much bigger? And here's where the story gets even more complicated. Some analysts believe one mysterious strike on a school may have changed everything.
Mixing combat footage with action movie clips. Several former senior U.S. military officials.
Reports say dozens of Israeli fighter jets recently launched coordinated strikes against key Iranian sites, while U.S. forces allegedly targeted military assets connected to drone operations. Officials have claimed that some Iranian capabilities were heavily damaged during these operations. But here's the part people miss. While those strikes were happening, conversations were reportedly taking place behind closed doors about something even more serious. According to several officials cited in media reports, President Donald Trump had privately expressed interest in the idea of deploying a small number of U.S. troops inside Iran for what were described as specific strategic purposes. Now, to be clear, the White House later pushed back, saying there was no plan for a full ground invasion and calling some of the speculation exaggerated. Still, the possibility alone has made military analysts uneasy. Because once troops enter the equation, everything changes. But then something else happened that raised even more questions. While the military operations continued, the White House social media accounts reportedly began posting war-themed memes online, mixing combat footage with action movie clips. Several former military officials criticized the posts, calling them inappropriate during an active conflict. And that's where the tone of the situation started to shift. Because while the online debate was heating up, attacks were still happening across the region.
In Bahrain, the government says Iran struck a hotel and 2 residential buildings. No injuries.
According to reports from regional governments, Iranian strikes were blamed for hitting a hotel and residential buildings in Bahrain, though officials said there were no injuries in that incident. Meanwhile, Azerbaijan accused Iran of launching drone attacks near an airport and close to a school. And in Israel, volunteers were seen cleaning debris from buildings that had been damaged during the fighting. The images quickly spread across social media, showing how rapidly the conflict was expanding. What started as targeted military operations now appeared to be affecting multiple countries at once. But here's where the story takes another unexpected turn. Because behind the scenes, another global power was suddenly being mentioned. Reports began circulating that Russia might be quietly assisting Iran by sharing intelligence information about U.S. military locations in the Middle East. Those claims were attributed to sources familiar with the situation, though they have not been independently confirmed in public detail. If true, analysts warned it could dramatically raise the stakes of the conflict. Because intelligence sharing between major powers during an active war could easily pull more countries into the fight. And when reporters asked Iranian officials about Russia's involvement, the answer only fueled more speculation.
I think it's scary, but it's meaningful that we're here, that we're helping here and not sitting in our house without doing anything.
While governments debated strategy, ordinary people were trying to escape the chaos. Some Americans who had been stuck in the region described scrambling to book multiple flights just to get home as airports reopened. Charter planes were reportedly sent to evacuate travelers from several countries as fears of further escalation grew. But even as civilians were leaving, the conflict itself was spreading to a completely new location. Lebanon suddenly became another front in the war after Israeli forces began targeting Hezbollah positions. Hezbollah is an armed group backed by Iran that the United States has labeled a terrorist organization. Strikes reportedly hit suburbs of Beirut, sending huge explosions through densely populated neighborhoods. And according to local reports, the violence forced hundreds of thousands of people to flee their homes almost overnight. Families packed into apartments, relatives squeezed into small spaces, and entire neighborhoods emptied as people tried to stay ahead of the next strike. But the emotional toll of the war was becoming impossible to ignore.
Tom pressing Iran's foreign minister about Russia on Thursday.
And they're actively helping you in this war? Well, they have always helped us.
And then came the moment that many observers now call the most disturbing incident of the entire conflict. An Iranian elementary school was hit during an airstrike. Iranian officials claimed that more than 170 people died, many of them children. No country immediately claimed responsibility for the attack. The Pentagon later confirmed that an investigation had begun after reports suggested the munition involved might have been linked to U.S. equipment. Officials stressed that the findings were preliminary and that the cause was still being examined. But satellite imagery analyzed by investigators reportedly showed multiple precise impacts on buildings inside the school compound.
I booked like 3 flights trying to get out of Dubai. This one stuck, and so I'm finally home.
Richard joins us now live. Richard, let's go back to that new reporting from NBC News about the possibility of a potential small ground unit inside of Iran of U.S. troops. The White House is responding tonight?
They are, and our reporting is that no final decision has been made. In a statement, the White House said that the story is based on assumptions from anonymous sources who are not part of the president's national security team and not read into these discussions. Tom.
Richard Engel for us. Richard, thank you. There's a new front in the war tonight, Lebanon, with Israel targeting Iranian-backed Hezbollah there. Israel is sending out evacuation alerts to civilians before it strikes, sparking a chaotic mass exodus. Danielle Hamamdjian is there.
Tonight, devastating explosions in a Beirut suburb as Israel targets Hezbollah, a paramilitary group backed by Iran the U.S. labels a terror organization.
So we are getting a first-hand look of the aftermath of one of the Israeli strikes on Beirut. It's in a densely populated area. It's part of a bombing campaign that is, for now, only escalating.
500,000 people already uprooted across the country of just 6 million, trying to escape the violence, fleeing Hezbollah strongholds in the southern suburbs, seeking refuge in central Beirut with not much more than the clothes on their back. Israeli forces send out evacuation alerts online with no timeline before a strike. A moment captured by Leila Sharour, who has 30 displaced relatives now crammed into her 3-bedroom home. We met Leila and her granddaughter in central Beirut.
When we finish, when? We want that.
You want peace?
Of course we want peace.
The new round of clashes began earlier this week when Hezbollah began firing rockets into Israel, following the killing of Iran's supreme leader. Now the fighting is intensifying far beyond the capital to southern Lebanon. And there are growing fears this war will drag on no matter what happens in Iran.
And Danielle joins us now live. Danielle, you heard explosions earlier. What's happening there tonight?
Yeah, Tom, and just in the past few minutes, we started hearing gunfire, possibly a warning that strikes could be coming soon. Tom?
Danielle Hamamdjian for us tonight. Danielle, thank you. Now to our NBC News investigation. It may be the most horrific incident of this war so far, a strike on an Iranian elementary school. No one has claimed responsibility. The Pentagon says it's investigating, but we have new reporting tonight suggesting the U.S. may be behind the attack. Molly Hunter has the details.
According to analysts reviewing the images, the damage appeared unusually targeted. That detail raised even more questions about whether the strike was intentional or the result of faulty intelligence. And that's where the story becomes even more complicated, because conflicting claims began spreading almost immediately. Some sources suggested the area had once been part of an old military compound, while people on the ground reportedly said it had not been used for military activity for more than a decade. Investigations are still ongoing, and no final conclusion has been publicly confirmed. But the aftermath left rows of small graves appearing in images from the area, a grim reminder of how devastating a single strike can be.
You look at these buildings that have been destroyed, do they look targeted to you?
The buildings on site were targeted individually and with incredible precision.
And while the world focused on the tragedy, another shockwave was quietly hitting far beyond the battlefield. The global economy started reacting almost instantly. Oil prices surged at a speed rarely seen before, reportedly jumping more than 30% within a single week. Gas prices climbed across the United States as markets struggled to adjust. Drivers began noticing the increases almost immediately, and economists warned the situation could worsen if the conflict continued.
All right, and with that, Christine joins us now live in studio. Christine, the big question, how high will prices go?
Yeah, one industry analyst, a veteran, told me that if you've got crude oil prices staying here, you're talking about $3.90 next week for gas. And if crude oil prices keep rising, you're talking about $4 a gallon pretty quick.
Close to $4. All right, Christine, we thank you for that. We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.
Financial markets also took a hit. The Dow Jones reportedly dropped thousands of points compared to its recent highs as investors feared a wider war could disrupt global supply chains. Airlines warned that higher fuel prices might soon lead to increased ticket costs. And perhaps the most alarming signal came from the Strait of Hormuz. That narrow waterway carries roughly 20% of the world's oil supply. But new shipping data suggested that many cargo vessels were refusing to enter the region at all, choosing instead to anchor outside the strait rather than risk being caught in the conflict. When one of the world's most critical energy routes slows down like that, the economic consequences can ripple everywhere. At the same time, economic reports began showing warning signs back home. Job numbers unexpectedly dropped, and unemployment ticked higher. Analysts debated whether the instability caused by the conflict might already be affecting business confidence and investment decisions. Some experts predicted gas prices could approach $4 per gallon if oil prices stayed elevated. Others argued the surge might only last a few weeks. But nobody seemed completely sure. And that uncertainty is exactly what has governments around the world watching this situation so closely. Because the biggest concern now isn't just the strikes that have already happened, it's what could happen next. Reports about potential U.S. ground troops entering Iran have not been confirmed as policy, and officials continue to say no final decision has been made. But the fact that the possibility is even being discussed shows just how tense the situation has become. Now multiple countries are involved indirectly through alliances, intelligence sharing, or proxy groups. Hezbollah is firing rockets. Israel is responding with strikes. Iran continues launching attacks. And powerful global players are positioning themselves carefully behind the scenes. Analysts warn that once a conflict reaches this level of complexity, predicting the next move becomes almost impossible. And that leads to the question many people are now asking. One mysterious strike, one miscalculation, one decision by a leader somewhere in the world could shift the entire balance overnight. Because if one incident can trigger this level of chaos across countries, economies, and millions of lives, what happens if the next strike is even bigger?